Hello, everybody, and welcome to a brand new episode. A very brand new episode, in fact, because it's the year 2018. Welcome to the year 2018, everybody. Here's hoping that all your relationships are satisfying in the year 2018, and that all the relationships that sucked for you in the year 2017, that you can bid them farewell. And here, as we transform our relationship with that which came before into that which will be, I would like to say that I am thankful for my relationship with you, my lovely audience. Thank you for coming. So this is episode number 11. If you haven't watched Hot for Teacher before, if you've missed the previous 10 episodes, that's okay. Hot for Teacher is more like a Star Trek The Next Generation than it is like Yuri on Ice, in the sense that you can watch these in any order. It's probably more like Yuri on Ice vis-a-vis gay stuff than it is Star Trek The Next Generation, but I'm glad you're here. So what do we do on Hot for Teacher? What happens here? So you have potentially, among you, gone to my website, www.adam-koble.com, and you clicked on the Hot for Teacher link, and on that page there is a form, and you might have filled it out because you had some questions about relationship stuff, and you thought that maybe I could answer those questions. And I read those questions, and I copied them, and I pasted them in my little notepad file. I made some notes, and I'm here to answer 3 of them today. So we're going to answer 3 of your questions, and we're going to talk about relationships. And I hope that even if these aren't your questions specifically, that they give you some insight into the way that you could think about relationships in your life. I'm here to provide insight and support. And hopefully you'll come away from today's episode thinking about your relationships with your friends and your loved ones and your family and your coworkers and your Twitch followers. And yeah, so we're going to do that thing. I want to say, and I always say this because it's important, Hot for Teacher is merely the beginning of any conversation. I hope that if you ask the question, if you are interested in the question, if you have your own stuff going on, I hope that you use this as inspiration to take the points that I bring up today and talk about them with your support network, right? Ask your best friend what they think about what I said in today's episode. If you agree, if you disagree, have your own conversations about these things, because as we know, every meaningful relationship is backed up by talking about it. Just a little, maybe a lot, who knows? So, today's first question arrives to me via a man named Chris. Now, Chris asks, how do you navigate the situation where 2 of your friends are shitty towards one another? I feel it becomes incredibly awkward to deal with one or both of the people and try to balance your relationships with each of them independently. Well, Chris, my boy, here, let me just move so you can see my face while I talk. I'm talking to your question, Chris. Well, Chris, my boy, I feel your pain. Interconnected social networks are the worst. Why can't we all just make a rule where our friends are not allowed to be friends with each other, and they can only ever hang out with us, and we never have to see them more than one at a time? Can we just make that rule? It would be a cure for every awkward group hangout or shitty drama-filled birthday party, right? Easy solution. Just only ever don't let friends. Except that you can't control that, and that's not really a solution, because without a group of friends, well, we wouldn't have role-playing games, would we? And I don't want to live in a world where role-playing games don't exist. And also, like, sometimes it's really nice when your friends are friends with each other, when you have that network and it works, but it doesn't always. Sometimes the people you are friends with are not very good friends to each other. So my knee-jerk reaction to this is, yo, Chris, this is not your problem. It's their problem. And make those fuckers sort it out. But realize that's not like actually my actual answer, because like almost all social stuff, it's more complex than just one thing. You're looking at a bunch of relationships here that are nested and webbed together, and it could take a little untangling. So there's your relationship with your first friend. Let's call this first friend, because you didn't give me their name, let's call your first friend Drizzt. And then you got your relationship with the other friend, and let's call your other friend Artemis. Just totally random names I picked off the top of my head. So you got Drizzt and you got Artemis, and there's your relationship with each of them, but there's also their relationship with each other, which hopefully involves less swords than their namesakes. And then there's this other thing. There's this other thing, this group dynamic for all of you together. Now, if Drizzt and Artemis are not already friends with each other, let's say they don't know each other very well, or they don't like each other, or they just don't get along, but they don't have a real significant relationship, this is pretty easy to work out. They don't have to be friends. They don't have to go to the same events. They don't have to be around each other or follow each other on Twitter or be Facebook friends or whatever. They can just call a ceasefire and pretend they do not coexist at all. So this means that when you and the rest of Clan Battlehammer get together, you're going to have to either invite one or the other, but maybe not both of them. Or else they're going to have to be grown-ups and be tolerant if displeased with each other's strangers. This is why I hate stuff like birthday parties. I think that we tend to have this assumption, we tend to be socialized around the idea that all of our acquaintances, I was going to say friends, but I think we feel like all of our acquaintances have to be able to get along and be friendly. There's this inborn idea, because humans are social animals, that we should just be able to be around anybody and be okay. I don't agree with that shit. I think that Drizzt and Artemis here have every right to dislike each other as much as they want. And I don't think that it's mutually exclusive to liking you. I don't know if you're familiar with the 5 geek social fallacies. You should look them up. They're interesting. But geek social fallacy number 4 is that friendship is transitive. And it's a fallacy for a reason. Friendship is not transitive. Drizzt and Artemis can just not get along, and that's fine. We're allowed to be in that situation. I have loads of people in my life who like or love or are dating, who are married to, are related to people that I do not like. There are a lot of people in the world I do not care for, but my preferences are not my friends' preferences. Not everyone has to like ramen as much as I do, right? Hell, I'm sure that I am that person for some people. I'm sure that there are people that I am very close to who have friends or loved ones who are like, ugh, Adam Coble, blah. Gross. And that's okay. I don't need everyone to like each other or me. No big deal. Fish in the sea, right? So if your friends are being shitty to each other, but there's some other thing forcing them together, stop doing that thing. Let them hate each other from a distance. Say you're all playing Dungeons and Dragons together, and Drizzt and Artemis are being shitty to one another, and you're like, listen, fuckers, one or both of you are fired from the game if you're both going to just snipe at each other the whole time. I get that you're not friends. Stop doing things that friends do together, right? Just stop the thing completely. Be like, look, we're going to stop the campaign. We're going to start a new one that neither of you are invited to. And that's fine. Now, this is all predicated on the idea that Drizzt and Artemis are like a random encounter for one another. That they know you, but they don't really know each other. But if that's not the case, and these two people are friends, but they keep having bad interactions come up, right? Like they're arguing in your Twitter feed or like attempting to assassinate each other. That's affecting not only their relationship with each other, but they're starting to fuck up the group dynamic, which makes it your business. It's affecting you. Now you get to express your needs and boundaries to both of them. And I say get to like it's a present. Get to like it's a gift, but honestly it's a burden. It's having friends is a burden sometimes. But it's also very nice. It's a nice thing to have. But in this case, that may represent a hard conversation that you have to have. But you need to balance that with the fact that they're independently friends with you, right? So you need to treat Drizzt with individual respect and care, and you need to do the same with Artemis. They both need to be treated like people. Now, I think the hardest way to come at this, but maybe the most successful, and certainly the most emotionally labor-intensive for you, would be to mediate their shittiness. You have a goal in mind, right? Your goal is to make it so you personally, Chris Battlehammer, you don't feel so fucked up all the time about how mean and crappy these two are to each other. Hopefully, they share that goal. They may want to continue being shitty to each other, and they're allowed, I guess, but they probably don't hate your guts. So they want you, because you're friends with both of them, they want you to be okay and not sad and crappy and turning to your favorite internet personality for help. Which, you know, I appreciate, but I'm sorry you're in this position. I think you're completely in the right to go to each of them individually and say, look, your feud with the other person is fucking me up and making me sad. And it's wrecking my friendship with you. I like you less because of how mean you and Drizzt are to one another. Can we please talk about that? You're hurting me. Make that conversation about you. Don't go in like an uninterested third party and be like, yo, I'm here to fix you and Drizzt's relationship. Be like, yo, I need you and me to fix our relationship. Make the conversation about you, how they're affecting you, that you are hurting, and that it sucks for you. Now, they might be able to justify why they're acting like crap to each other, but it's much harder to justify hurting you as a result, right? Drizzt might be like, Artemis tried to steal the crystal shard, and Artemis might be like, I'm being paid to hate Drizzt. But neither of them have a reason to be upset or to be upsetting to you, right? Their feud hurting you isn't something they should be able to just back out of. Don't make this conversation about stopping or about why they're doing it to each other. Make it about you expressing your needs and asking them individually or as a group to participate in a conversation about that. If you're comfortable, you can mention like, yo, I do actually want you to be able to work this out, and I'm willing to be a part of that process because I love both of you. If that's true. If it's not true, do not offer that. If it's not true, just tell them you need them to help you address the real problem, right? Sitting them down individually ought to work that out. And if you're invested in them getting along or you want to take an emotional risk to help them work out their shit, you can sit down together, but that's like a separate situation. What matters here is your relationship with each of them as individuals, and that their relationship with each other ultimately should have nothing to do with you. So try to remember that them being better friends would solve the problem, but it isn't the solution to the problem, right? Keep in mind, while we talk about all this, keep in mind that the way that people treat each other can be a pretty good indicator of the way people will continue to treat each other. Which means that if old Drizzy and Artemis here are nasty to their friends when things get hard, there's a chance that kind of nastiness will come your way too, which you don't want. I'm not saying it's like a red flag and you should bail on both of them, but be aware, people treat people according to their patterns, and that stuff can change. What's interesting to me about this question is that it feels so much like an office hours question, right? Like I'm framing it like in a fantasy context because it's funny, but also because This sounds like a question a GM would ask me. A lot of game masters feel like this kind of social wrangling is their responsibility. And just like I would tell a GM, I'm going to tell you, their friendship is not your job. But if the way they interact is making you unhappy, it is your job to be honest and to confront that. And the solution is going to depend on the circumstances. But remember, them being friends is secondary to the way their interaction is making you feel, at least as far as this goes. Sit them down, tell them how you feel, maybe all have a talk together, and I hope that they'll at least work with you, if not with each other. And if it comes down to it and they're not willing to behave differently for your sake, you don't have to be friends with either of them. Don't forget that. It can be easy, I think, to lose ourselves in the deep interconnected web of who likes who and who doesn't. Our friends have friends. Our romantic partners might know our families. Our friends meet each other over shared interests. But what can appear to be a complicated mess is actually just a series of one-to-one interconnected relationships. You and Drizzt. You and Artemis. Artemis and Drizzt. Drizzt and Catti-brie. Catti-brie and Wulfgar. Wulfgar and you get what I'm saying. Regis? What was the halfling's name? Doesn't matter. Thinking about it that way helps me feel more comfortable in complex, interconnected relationship networks. I tend to feel very overwhelmed by that kind of thing. And for me, looking at it as me and this person, me and this other person, they have a relationship, but it's not my responsibility. That helps. And I hope that this has helped you. Question number two comes from Cowardly in California. Cowardly in California asks, how does one become a member of an internet community? I am a chronic lurker. I use social media regularly. Shoutouts to all the lurkers out there. But my accounts are blank. This is in of itself not a problem, but it worked for me for many years. I've gotten to the point where I don't want it anymore. Maybe because I'm in a good place with my social anxiety, or maybe because I have found a passion in tabletop role-playing and game design, and I want to get involved. But navigating a space that you admire so much and where everyone seems to know each other is really intimidating. Also, so much advice just isn't practical. Just get out there and do it. It gives me nothing to work with. Yes, that's why we're here. So I could really use some practical advice on how to form and maintain relationships on the internet with the community as a whole and individuals within it. Now, this is a big question, but I do think that you hit on some very significant points, right? This bit about, God, my imagining here is when someone talks about, I'm gonna be an oldster for a second. I'm gonna refer to a TV show that maybe none of you have seen. There's this old TV show about a bar called Cheers. And the idea of the bar called Cheers is that it's a place where everybody knows your name, right? And it's about all the regulars that go to this bar and how they all know each other and each other's problems, and they're all part of each other's lives, and some of them get spin-off shows. But what always fucked me up about Cheers was the idea of walking into a bar where everyone already knows each other and they all look at you like, who the fuck's this? Whose man's is that? Right? So it's incredibly intimidating to wander into an environment that you so desperately want to be a part of, but everybody already knows each other, and now you are trying to insert yourself into that situation. And I think it can be the hardest thing in the world to be the center of attention in that way. Sometimes it's nice being the center of attention when all your friends are, patting you on the head and giving you hugs and telling you they love you, celebrating your birthday or whatever. But it can be terrifying wandering into a room full of people who all know each other and you don't know them and they're all looking at you like, who the fuck is this? So for me, this kind of anxiety happens when I go to group events because I get trapped Let me get a little personal here. I get trapped between two polar opposite social desires, both of which cause me anxiety, right? I hate being late for things, and I get anxious if I think I'm going to be late. It's really important for me to arrive to shit on time, but I also hate being the first person to a thing. I don't want to be that awkward guy who shows up at the party way before everybody else. I don't like being the first person at a restaurant, so I have to play a very tricky game of chicken with my own anxiety. The reason that I bring it up is because the thing that makes me uncomfortable is that spotlight. It's that focus, the feeling of walking into a room and having all the people who live in the house where the party is happening look at me and be like, who's this stranger in our house in the middle of our conversation? I hate it. It's silly, and I can usually get over it, but if I get to a party and there's 5 people there and they all know each other and they're people that I'm there that I've met and they haven't arrived with me and I'm alone with a bunch of strangers who know each other, I'm just like, I'm going to go. I'm going to come back in 20 minutes when everybody is there. Thank you. I think a lot of the time, this kind of anxiety can translate online into communities because becoming an organic part of a conversation is very hard on the internet. If a raucous conversation about, I don't know, fictional positioning is going on in chat, and you really want to bring up an anecdote that you know fits the situation, the conversation, you kind of just have to shout into the middle of the conversation, don't you? There's no leaning in. There's no taking a breath. There's no gesturing with your hands to indicate that you have something to contribute. You just have to sort of leap in and be like, yo, this one time I was playing RuneQuest, and hope that someone will listen to you. It can be nerve-wracking because either people will just ignore you completely or suddenly everyone will shut up. And both of those things can be paralyzing. Now, I think that there are some tricks that you can use to ease that process. I think that reading a room, this has come up a lot actually in moderating and kind of overseeing the Math Squad Discord, which is the place where, when I'm not live, fans of my content and fans of each other and friends, they are having these conversations offline when I'm not streaming, right? So that's what the Math Squad Discord is. And I've got a team that helps me moderate it. Big ups to them. And we talk about this a lot, how to make the community easier to get involved in, because I want it to be open. I want people to be allowed to jump into these conversations. And I think that teaching people skills to read a room becomes super important when you want them to get involved in discussions and conversations online. Judging the pace of the conversation, knowing whether it's a friendly open chat you can just jump into or an intense debate between two regulars who maybe have some friction. I find the best way to become a part of a conversation is not to interject with a point, but to ask questions. It's a good way to participate in a fashion that moves with the flow of the conversation. If two people are discussing, say, the differences between D&D and Pathfinder, for example, you could ask about a particular thing. You could say, how is a certain monster different between the two systems? Or how does this mechanism work in D&D? I'm only familiar with Pathfinder. And that way, you can get your foot in the door without interrupting. Often we want to jump in with like feedback or an opinion. We want to say something that'll make an impact, shake things up. But I think questions do that in a way that is smoother than making a declarative statement. Say that conversation's going on and you say, oh, that's interesting. Does the same difference apply to goblins as it does to orcs? Someone else will have the opportunity to answer and to say, no, actually, it's like this. And then you can reply and say, oh, cool, thank you. I was asking because, and that can and often will expand the conversation, which you are now a part of Congratulations. Now, if not, you'll get an answer, you'll have your voice heard, and maybe look for another chance to jump in. The idea here is being seen and participating in a conversation. Something else that you can do, especially when things aren't in full tilt already, is propose a topic. I see this in the Math Squad quite a lot. We like to share things with each other. So if there's a channel about, say, game design or role-playing games, you could begin a conversation when something is slow, right? This is reading the room, seeing when the conversation is not already in full tilt and being like, hey, I noticed this Kickstarter just started. The designer is the same designer that made this other game I really like. Has anyone seen this? Does anybody else back this? Ask questions, right? This is conversational basics. It's about saying, here is a thing. Would you like to talk about the thing? Does anyone have feedback about the thing? Oh, interesting. Now we're talking, right? Often the first post that I see in the Discord is in the role-playing channel, because that's something that a lot of us have in common, role-playing games. And it'll be about a game they like or asking for information about something they're curious about, you know. I've watched the first few episodes of Roll20 Presents The Burning Wheel. I've never played The Burning Wheel, but can someone help me understand this rule? Or is this a good game to play with people who haven't played role-playing games before? Etc. Contextualize with familiarity. For example, I've been reading Zweihander. I really like how it is a modern feeling take on the themes and mechanisms of Warhammer Fantasy. Is anybody else a Warhammer Fantasy fan? Has anyone else read Zweihander? What do you think? What's the comparison there? People will start to respond. You'll get to be a part of a conversation that you started about a thing you're knowledgeable or at the very least curious about. Because I think that in conversation, curiosity is more important than knowledge. So you don't need to know everything about everything. You just need to be interested. Get your start by encouraging more conversation, either through questions or by positing a topic, and that'll get a talk going. And you'll start to learn who likes what and who are people you might want to talk with more. And I think just being around, sending messages, asking questions, having feedback, being a part of a community is important. The visibility of just replying. You don't have to be the star. You don't have to have that spotlight. You just want to contribute. And I know that that's nerve-wracking, but these are ways I think you can contribute. I know that if I see someone regularly asking smart questions and participating in other folks' conversations, even if they're not the center of things, I tend to remember them. Think about what you want to get out of the community too, right? Do you want people to talk about role-playing games with? Do you want someone to help you playtest your game? Do you just want some friends to play RPGs with? Is it cerebral? Is it emotional? Do you want a new group to play D&D with? Do you have a specific goal, or do you just want general social support? It doesn't mean that that's all you're ever going to get or that you should be closed off to other things, but it's often easier than trying to fulfill a desire of being a part of a community, because that's a nebulous thing that you can do in lots of different ways. There are people in our community who are there to debate philosophy. There are people who are there to talk about politics. There are people who want to share drawings and photos. There are people who want to play games. There are people who just want to goof around on the internet. There are more reasons to be a part of a group of people than anyone could begin to name. And you often start with one and find your way in another. In the same way, I started off playing games with Elf and Dave and Blue Jay and Andrew, and now we're all really close friends. Well, I've known Andrew for ages, but we started playing games too. You might find your relationship with individuals in the community might vary. You might have one relationship with the community, and then dozens of relationships with individual people inside that community. This kind of evolution is a tale as old as time, right? Person plays MMO, person joins guild, person meets other person playing the game, they start instant messaging, bing, bang, boom, they're married and they have babies or whatever. Social context evolves. And from where you are, feeling like an outsider, a lurker, or a stranger, you can reassure yourself that your context will change too. You might not be someone who feels recognized in the community now, but with time and patience, that can change. And a big part of this, I think this is monstrously important. Okay? And I think by asking me about this, I hope you're already starting down the right path, but a big part of this is choosing a community to be a part of in a way that is smart and positive for you as a person. Not all communities are the same kind of welcoming or encouraging of new folks. Find one that feels like it would be a lower emotional risk to get into. Community is one of these things that we find ourselves engaging with on such an independent level that when we look back and try to think, how did we get here? We find that it's hard to offer advice because it all just seems to have happened. Even when we do it on purpose. I think engaging the right space, being a little brave, getting things started with questions and recognizing that the stakes are low. No community that you want to be a part of will ostracize you for needing a little patience on your way in, right? And if this question is like low-key, subtly asking how you can be a better, more involved part of Math Squad, get your butt in there. I'm personally very excited. I'm giving you an opportunity right now. Here's your opportunity, all right? After you listen to me answering your question, Cowardly in California, after you listen to this, go on to the Math Squad Discord, go into general, and say, hi, I'm Cowardly in California. My question was featured on today's episode of Hot for Teacher. You guys want to talk about role-playing games? And we'll all be like, yeah, we love you. Welcome. Come in. Let's all talk to you about role-playing games. There's your in, all right? Tell them I sent you. Our third question today, our third and final question today, is interesting because it's a theoretical one, and it's actually more about me than it is about the person. This is a hypothetical question, so I'm going to talk about me and what I think and feel about my relationships. It's a good one. I'm excited. I love talking about myself. Who doesn't like talking about themselves? I mean, lots of people, but I'm not having this issue myself at this time, but tell me, wise one, not an official title of Adam Cole, just saying. Tell me, wise one, what do you think of the platitude, you can't get over the last one until you find the next one? So there's this movie I like, right? There's this film that I enjoy, and in it there's this guy Morpheus, and there's this lady, the Oracle, and the Oracle is like, she can like see the future, and Morpheus is on a quest, and so Morpheus, he goes in to see the Oracle, and he's like, yo, your oracularness, I need to find the one. And she's like, hey, idiot, you ever consider the idea that putting the fate of humanity on a single person's a bad idea? And he's like, oh shit, that's a good point. I should consider using my resources to train the operatives that I have and prepare humanity for a grassroots resistance movement so that we can overthrow our robotic overlords. And she's like, yeah, you want a cookie? At least, that's how I remember it going, right? And they had a big sweaty rave. The details are getting foggy in my old age. 1999 was a long time ago. What I mean to illustrate here is that as far as this whole idea goes, I'm opposed to the idea of the one as a concept. The idea that we can only devote our attention and care to a single person is sort of a ridiculous idea to me. Now, it doesn't mean that I'm like fundamentally anti-monogamy. I think there's lots of reasons to just focus your attention on one person. And I think that everyone should and can have the relationships they want. And maybe that involves lots of romantic and sexy time partners because, like, fuck it, everybody does things differently. But some people don't have time or energy or desire for that. And I'm not going to tell anybody how to live their life. Except like Nazis. Change your way, fascist scumbags. But as far as how we love and who we love, there's no right or wrong way to do it as long as everybody is consenting and happy. Now, I do think the idea that there has to be only one person, or that there's fundamentally only space for one person to be loved at a time, and that we rotate them out with some specific pattern is silly. Like, I just don't understand that. I have so many close friends, and I get so much positive energy from the relationships that I have. I can't imagine saying, sorry, you know, I already have a best friend. You have to be a third best friend, but maybe you can get an upgrade when the slot is empty. My friends, my relationships are not potions and scrolls. My heart is not the Diablo 2 inventory screen. And even if it were, even if I could only attune to a single person of a single relationship type at a time, the taxonomical attempt to understand the boundaries of that relationship's emotional in and output would just blow my capacity to think pretty fucking quick. It's a lot more work. For me, at least, which is the person you asked about here. I'm answering this question about me. It's a lot more work for me trying to keep all that shit straight. Who am I allowed to hug? Who am I allowed to talk to on the phone? Who am I not? What I can and can't do outside of each individual person's relationship with me? What social pressures do I have to deal with to know what I am and am not allowed to do? Like, I hate the idea that if someone takes a picture of me at a party hugging Dave. No, you know what? Dave's a bad example. I would never hug Dave because Dave does not like being hugged. Let's say there's a picture of me hugging Andrew. Andrew loves hugs. Andrew's all about that shit. So let's say there's a picture of me hugging Andrew. I don't like the idea that I have to worry that someone is going to send that picture to another of my friends and be like, Adam's hugging Andrew. That's, aren't you worried about that? Like, that kind of socially orchestrated horse shit just doesn't, I'm not wired for it. So, for me, whatever kind of relationships I have in my life, I do not have the one. Or, you know what, maybe I have lots of the ones. Maybe my life isn't like a D&D party with clearly defined roles and niche protection for everyone in the group. Maybe my life is more like Fiasco. Well, mechanically, not fictionally, where everyone is the GM in some ways, and we all share the responsibility of telling the story of our relationships together. I don't really believe in hard transitions of relationships either, because I think those require the kind of taxonomical heavy lifting that I'm not interested in doing. I would rather devote my energy to working out what makes a relationship feel good than what a relationship is. For me, the idea of there being a one and there not being a one is pretty crappy, but I think there is something to be said for giving ourselves space to process. I don't think necessarily that all relationships are built to ebb and flow and change gently, nor should they. I'm not against breakups. Sometimes there are relationships that because of safety or because of need or just because it's the right thing to do, they just terminate, right? We cut ourselves off. It always feels a little sad to me when that happens, but I think it's how a lot of people's narratives go. You know, you build up a lot of emotional investment in relationships sometimes, and you build up an idea in your head of how you want that relationship to be. You decide on activities. You decide on attitudes. You have an idea of how things are. And when things stop being that way, because of practical reasons, incompatibility, just disagreement about the nature of things, it can be really hard to change gears. You know, you hang out with someone, you develop strong relationship feelings for them, and you want them to reciprocate, but they don't want to, or they're not interested in the same kind of relationship that you are. And now you feel burned or hurt by that. You feel let down. You feel disappointed. Which is fair. I think it's okay to feel crappy when we don't get what we want. But that's a thing that I think as we grow and learn to be better humans, we get better at dealing with disappointment. Think about a time where someone or something has really disappointed you. Think about a time where you've wanted something, especially out of a relationship. Maybe you want to smooch someone who doesn't want to smooch you. Maybe you want someone to want to play a game that you love with you and they don't want to. Maybe someone doesn't like a movie you loved and that makes you feel like they don't understand you. It's okay to feel crappy about being disappointed, but I think the emotionally immature thing to do is when you're deep in a relationship with someone and the relationship changes is burn it all down, right? To say, well, if you don't want to smooch me anymore, gasoline, matches, the relationship is dead because I didn't get what I want. Maybe that's not the easy way to do it, but I think that people just want to excise things that they can't have or they don't want to have anymore, which I get. I think it's fine to give yourself room from a relationship before or while it's changing, but I think what we should do is not think about getting over a relationship in the sense of like saying goodbye to it forever, but think about relationship alchemy. I think we all want to get comfortable with relationships as protean objects, right? My relationship with every one of my close friends has changed over time, and it has made me love them more, right? I have channel moderators who became role-playing game players, who became close friends, right? I have people I smooch that used to be strangers. I have friends that I fell in love with and then stopped being in love with and who are really good friends because of it. Relationship alchemy is super important. And I think that it's cool to move through that space with someone. But it can be hard going from deeply intimate cohabitating sex partners to occasionally casual friends who see each other once in a while at the drop of a proverbial hat. The best lovers make the best enemies or worst enemies. You know? I think it can be easier for some folks to go from relationship type 1 to relationship type 2, whatever forms those takes, with a gap in between. Time away. Restart the relationship. Build a new thing together instead of just refurbishing the old thing. I don't like categorizing. I don't like talking about categorizing. I choke on it. I don't like categorizing any relationship advice into specific subsets like this, right? Like, I think that this is good relationship advice for any sort of relationship. The fundamental structures of consent, respect, care, and kindness, no matter what activity your relationship includes, should be followed, right? If you break up with your husband, if you break up with a friend, if you break up with your D&D group, or you stop going to see your dentist, maybe you just need some time. Not because you need to find another person to fit that role, because I think that's a fallacy, right? People are irreplaceable. A person is a part of the relationship you have with them, even if the parameters of the relationship are exactly the same. This is why I kind of hate the idea of like serial monogamy. The idea of like, I got a boyfriend. Now I broke up with my boyfriend. Now I got a different boyfriend. Now I got to break up with him. Now I got a different boyfriend. I like this one a lot. Nope, relationship's over. Got me another boyfriend. All my boyfriends are the same. We use the same rules. I have the same structures. We do the same shit together. We eat the same food, go to the same restaurants. Boyfriends. But that's horse shit because all your boyfriends Julian, Enrique, Hero, all of them bring to the table something beautiful and unique because of the fact that they're people. They're not just boyfriends, right? So even if you're in a situation where you only have one intensive, devoted relationship at a time, right? Even if you were doing the monogamy thing, which to be clear is fine, recognize that boyfriend A, boyfriend B, boyfriend C are all different people. And as such, your relationship with them is irreplaceable. Just because someone stops being a lover or a fighter or a fighter, wizard, rogue in your life doesn't mean they stop being everything. Part of the process of getting over a relationship might be figuring out not what your new relationship is, but what your relationship looks like with the person who is no longer your boyfriend. A relationship should be allowed to end and change into something new. If we threw away Narsil just because it was broken, we would never get Enduril, right? And then what are we? We're a disappointed Aragorn. But it's okay to recognize that a busted thing can be well and truly busted, that no amount of magic will repair it, and it's okay to move on. So to kind of go back and break it all down again, the idea that we can't get over the loss of a relationship until we replace that relationship is sort of silly because every relationship is different and unique and beautiful. If we lose a relationship, it's gone forever because the person that we're with brings so much to the table that we will never have that thing again, for better or for worse. This isn't even so much about the rejection of the idea of the one as it is about the idea that every single relationship we have is a one. If we are Morpheus and the only thing that matters to us is finding our Neo, we are doing a grave disservice to Trinity and to Tank and to Mouse and to Cypher, even though he ended up being a dirtbag. We never get back what we lose, but we make new things. Brand new, unique, beautiful things all the time. So, yeah, it's fair to mourn a relationship changing into something else. It's fair to change relationships into new ones, reforging them into a thing that fits better for the people in it. But it's fair to let go, too. It's fair to have people fade or vanish from our lives. Let's not pretend that a boyfriend or a bestie is a title like a bucket that we just empty and fill and empty and fill. Even if we elect a new prime minister every once in a while, there is a person wearing that prime minister suit. So it goes for matters of the heart. A new love might make for us an easier job of forgetting an old one, but it will never replace it. Nothing can. Which in a way is both immeasurably freeing and, like so much human interaction, kind of sad. So go with life, I guess. And maybe it's an indicator that we ought to treat all our relationships like they matter. Whether we're in them, whatever shape they take. Because, I mean, they do. Right? Well, thanks for coming, everybody. This has been episode number 11 of Hot for Teacher, a write-in relationship advice show that is also sometimes kind of about role-playing games or Lord of the Rings or The Matrix. Anyway, it's a nerdy relationship advice show. I'm Adam Coble, and if you want to ask me questions about relationships, you can do so by going to www.adam-coble.com, clicking on the Hot for Teacher link, and filling out that form. And I would love to answer your question on the air. Thanks for coming, everybody. Have a wonderful day and a fantastic 2018. And we will see you again next time.